ABA in Northern Virginia. I've been working in the field of ABA for about 6 years now and supervising for over 2. If you're interested in learning more about my consultation services, supervision services, or want to schedule a time to talk, please reach out via email. And I'm giving this presentation on behalf of MDA Africa, and they offer a wide variety of services in Africa, including ABA services and many other countries across the world. So if you're interested in any of their services, their email will be at the end of the presentations and you can reach out. So what is a function of behavior? So functions of behaviors are basically a reason why a behavior occurs. So it provides a reason for why a behavior continues to occur. And if we can identify that, it can provide insight to the motivation or the need for that specific behavior. And when we've identified it, it allows professionals to formulate an appropriate response to assist with replacing or shifting the behavior if needed. And there are 4 different functions. So the first is attention. So this basically means that the behavior continues to occur because of the response or the attention received from another individual. Sometimes it's positive, like verbal praise, a hug, a high five, and sometimes it can be negative. So a verbal reprimand, a large reaction if your child's getting under your skin and you're kind of getting irritated, those types of things. The next one is for escape or avoidance of a task. So the behavior is used to escape, reduce, postpone, or avoid a non-preferred task or activity. And this can take many different forms. So it could be actually getting up and leaving the area. If you're working with a client at a table, swiping all the materials off the table, throwing a tantrum, throwing their body on the floor, all of those different things. The next is tangible. So this is when a behavior is used to gain access to a tangible item, like a snack or an activity. And then lastly, we have sensory. So when a behavior has a sensory function, it means that it occurs due to an intrinsic motivation or an internal outcome. So it's not reliant on another person's reaction or response. It's not reliant on getting access to something or escaping something. So why should we identify a behavior's function? So when we identify behavior's function or the reason it keeps happening, it allows for a specific and targeted intervention or response to be developed and used. And it provides insight into why a behavior keeps occurring and the purpose that it serves for the individual. So for example, if we have a client who every time we present a matching activity throws themselves on the floor and attempts to run away, that behavior might serve the purpose of escape. They might be trying to get out of doing that task. Maybe it's too hard, maybe it's too easy and they're bored, maybe they just don't like it. All of those things could play into that. And so knowing that reason and why they're engaging in that behavior can help us set up the environment and a reinforcement system to encourage the individual to complete that activity. So there are several different ways where we can figure out a function of a behavior. So the first is a functional behavior assessment, and that has several different parts. So it includes a functional analysis, descriptive assessment or ABC data, and an indirect assessment. So when we're determining a function, there are a few things to keep in mind. So how do we know when we've determined a function? So the first is we need to collect baseline data. It could be approximately 2 weeks or until you've identified a consistent pattern. We'll use one of the methods mentioned on the slide before and record the behavioral data within 20 minutes of it occurring. And we're going to make sure we keep our report objective and review the data regularly to identify a pattern. So when we're collecting baseline data, it's important that we don't change our behavior or do things differently. We want to make sure we're keeping everything the same as it was before so that our accurate data is recorded. So how do we identify a behavior's function? So first we have our functional behavior assessment. So this allows hypotheses to be formed about the relationships between behaviors and environmental variables. It's designed to obtain information about the function of a certain behavior for that individual. And there's going to be a video example if you'd like to watch that on your own time. So when using a functional behavior assessment, there are 3 strategic approaches. So the first is that you can alter an antecedent variable. So that means we can change or eliminate the discrimination stimuli that can cause difficult behavior or the motivating operations for the difficult behavior. So what that means is that we would change something that happens before the behavior. So if we know that a client usually elopes or leaves the table after 5 minutes, we can plan in a break to occur at 4 minutes so that we have set up the environment for success. You can also alter consequence variables. So that's identifying a source of reinforcement, identifying what they're trying to obtain and motivating them to complete the activity to obtain it, and also teaching an alternate behavior. So that's using that source of reinforcement to identify an appropriate replacement behavior. So then as a part of the FBA, we have the functional analysis. So this replicates antecedents and consequences in their natural environment, and we observe and measure the separate effects on the difficult behavior. So basically it tests each potential function. So attention, tangible, escape, and sensory, and we record the data based on the individual's reaction. And so in whichever scenario the behavior occurs the most, that's identified as the potential function. And there's a video example here if you'd like to watch that. And then there's also the descriptive assessment. So that's a direct observation. It's also known as ABC data. So this one is very widely used because it's very easy for parents to use. When doing a functional assessment, it requires a lot of instructional control and environmental control. And sometimes if you're working in the home with an individual, it can be difficult to account for all the variables that may play into that individual's behavior at that time. So this using ABC data or descriptive assessment can be very helpful in just gathering more information. And so the ABCs of behavior, so we have the antecedent, that's what happens right before the target behavior. We have the behavior, so that's whatever's happening, whatever behavior you're observing and identifying. And then the consequence is what happens immediately after. And the consequence doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It could be positive. It's just whatever happens right after. And that's what you're going to mostly be looking at, because that will help you identify potentially why that behavior keeps occurring. So here's an example. So a setting event would be John playing with his trains. An antecedent would be mom asking John to put his trains away. And the behavior is John, he screams, he cries, he throws the trains, and he hits mom. The consequence is mom ignoring John's behavior, and then she returns to cooking dinner. So here's a video example that we're going to watch. So I'm going to switch my screen.
Okay, it's time to go to sleep. Gotta go brush your teeth.
Like a movie?
Not right now. Tomorrow. What, sweetie?
Milk.
Sure, you can have some more milk.
More milk.
Yeah, you can have some more milk, and then we'll go brush teeth.
Milk.
Yeah, you want milk? I cleaned it up. Do you want more milk?
More milk.
Okay, you gotta come this way. Here's your milk.
More milk.
Is it empty?
That's talking.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you gave me?
All done?
More milk.
No, it's time to go brush teeth. You can have water.
I have water.
Yeah, you can have water. You want water?
And water. I'll catch it. I catch it.
Okay. Okay. So in that video, what was the consequence for the behavior? So being told it was time for bed, getting to watch a movie, providing with the remainder of milk and water prior to transitioning to bed, or being placed in timeout. So in this situation, the consequence was being provided with the remainder of milk and water prior to the transition to bed. Although there was a slight delay between the original directive of we're going to bed and transitioning to bed, she did transition to bed without much attention being paid to her initial large reaction. So without ABC data, we would not be able to know why a behavior occurs and why we would not be able to specifically shape a behavior to something that's more appropriate while making sure that the child's needs are still getting met. So how do we record ABC data? So there are several different ways. So we can use a chart or we can use a table. So the following slides are going to be some examples of that. So a chart could look like this. So basically you've broken it down between an antecedent, a behavior, and a consequence. So the antecedent is Jessica getting dressed before playing blocks. The behavior is dropping to the floor, screaming, crying, and banging her head. And the consequence is the behavior is ignored and the attempts to play blocks are blocked until she's fully dressed. Here's an example of a chart. This might be something that as a professional you would give to a parent, or as a parent you might receive, and you would just check off the things that happened. Here's an example of a table. So we have our target behavior of slapping self on the legs with open palms. We have a couple of different days listed, and then the antecedents, the behaviors, and the consequences during each of those instances. So this might be something, again, that parents would fill out at home, or you might fill out during a session if you're a professional. And here's going to be a video example that you can watch on your own time if you'd like. So there's also an indirect assessment. So this includes structured interviews, rating scales, questionnaires that identifies information, and it's typically given to a person close to the individual. So this might be information that you use with a parent, and you ask them questions about different behaviors that happen, what usually happens before, what usually happens after, in regards to gain more information. So when we're conducting an FBA overall, there are 4 main steps. So first is gaining information through an indirect assessment. So those questionnaires, the rating scales from parents, or descriptive assessment. So collecting ABC data, having a parent collect ABC data. We then interpret that data and we identify a potential hypothesis about why a behavior keeps occurring. And then this is when you would actually test the hypothesis. So this is when you would conduct a functional analysis. If you're able to have yourself in a controlled environment and you're able to do that. And then based on the results of that, we would develop an intervention based on the function. So for example, if we have an individual who engages in a tantrum every time a parent is on the phone, and we identify the function as being attention, we would pick an intervention that would allow that child to access attention before mom or dad or the parent got on the phone, know that they could access it after, and also teach them how to appropriately request attention and when to appropriately request it if someone's on the phone, like in an emergency or something like that. So here's an example. So when Mark's parents are busy cooking dinner, he often hits his sister. When he does this, at least one of his parents come over and reprimand him, and they also console his sister and give her a lot of attention. Mark then often gets to go into the kitchen and help finish cooking dinner. So in this situation, we're going to try to figure out the function of Mark's behavior and what he's trying to obtain. So Mark's hitting behavior is maintained by attention. He's using this behavior to obtain his parents' attention, and he wants to go into the kitchen and help cook dinner. His parents' verbal reprimand is serving as reinforcement for Mark, and it's also encouraging him to continue engaging in the behavior because he then gets to go into the kitchen and cook with them. So here are a few potential interventions that Mark's family could use to help with that. So they could offer Mark the option to help cook prior to even beginning cooking dinner. They could offer Mark attention right before beginning to cook dinner so that his attention cup is filled. And they could also use a token system to reinforce Mark for appropriately playing with his sister while they're cooking. And so one thing to keep in mind is that if you're a parent, so planning time to spend actively playing with your child can assist with some of those attention seeking behaviors. If we've already filled their attention cup before we need to go get something done, they're often able to handle some of that independent play for longer. So next steps. So now we've recorded the data, we've determined a function. Now what do we do? So this is when it's time to think of an alternate or more appropriate way that your child or your client could obtain whatever they're trying to get. Are they trying to escape? Are they trying to obtain access to something? Are they trying to get your attention? And then this is where we can teach a new behavior or skills if needed. We can fill in with functional communication. We can help shape more socially appropriate attention gaining strategies and things like that. And we'll pick an intervention strategy to use. So if you have any questions,
you can reach me at my email listed below. You can also reach MDA Africa at their email listed below. Thank you.